Rafael Nadal's retirement marked the end of an era in men's tennis. Universally admired for his relentless fight, mental fortitude, and iconic dominance on clay, his legacy as one of the greatest players of all time remained undisputed. Yet beneath the praise and accolades lay a long-standing controversy that many chose to overlook or speak about in hushed tones, and that is his on-court behavior, particularly his persistent time-wasting and ritualistic delays, which irritated opponents and strained the patience of umpires for nearly 2 decades. Throughout his career, Nadal consistently pushed and often exceeded the limits of acceptable time between points. Even before the shot clock era, when enforcement was largely subjective and left to the discretion of the chair umpire, Nadal was known for taking well over the allotted 20 seconds between points. His rituals were extensive and precise, from meticulously aligning his water bottles to the hair tucks, nose wipes, shirt pulls, and short adjustments before every serve. His routine became both iconic and excessive. What many fans accepted as a quirky habit or a mental preparation strategy, numerous players saw as deliberate gamesmanship that disrupted rhythm and slowed the match to Nadal's preferred tempo. Over time, Nadal's extreme pacing and constant delays became such a recurring issue that they played a role in shaping actual rule changes in the sport. The ATP's introduction of the visible shot clock in 2018 was not an abstract decision. It was a direct response to years of complaints about slow play, and Nadal, as the most high-profile offender, was at the heart of that conversation. The shot clock was designed to strip away the ambiguity and leniency that Nadal often benefited from, forcing him and others to play within clearer and more uniformly enforced time boundaries. Once the ATP introduced the shot clock to improve the pace of play, Nadal continued to walk a fine line. He regularly played right up to the limit, often starting his service motion at the very last second, and even then received time violations on several occasions. His reaction to those warnings was often one of visible frustration or disbelief, as though the enforcement of the rule was somehow an affront to his process. He would later defend his timing by claiming that he needed those seconds to manage nerves, regain composure, or deal with the physical intensity of his style. But to many of his rivals, especially those who valued rhythm and pace, it came off as a carefully honed tactic that gave him more recovery time and broke their momentum. Over the years, Nadal's behavior on court drew subtle criticism from some of his peers, though rarely in open terms. The reverence he commanded in the sport made it difficult for players to speak out without facing backlash from fans or appearing disrespectful. Yet the resentment simmered under the surface. Roger Federer, always diplomatic, hinted at the issue more than once, suggesting that some players simply took too long between points. Novak Djokovic, more outspoken at times, mimicked Nadal's long pre-serve routine during a press conference, a clear nod to what he viewed as unfair leniency shown by umpires. Younger players, less encumbered by tradition or reverence, were more direct in their frustration. Denis Shapovalov notably lost his temper during a match against Nadal at the 2022 Australian Open, accusing the officials of favoring Nadal and exclaiming that the system was corrupt. Others, like Stefanos Tsitsipas or Nick Kyrgios, who recently opened up about his issues with Nadal, could be seen visibly upset and frustrated by the Spaniard. Nadal's status as a legend appeared to afford him more leniency than others. While lesser-ranked players received quick code violations or fines for time wasting, Nadal often escaped with warnings or discretion. That disparity bred frustration, particularly in high-stakes matches where every second of rest could shift the balance, especially on grueling surfaces like clay. What made the issue more contentious was that the delays weren't random or occasional. They became more pronounced in key moments, breakpoints, end-of-set games, or after long rallies. In those situations, Nadal frequently slowed the match down, taking extra time to collect himself, request the towel, and run through his rituals. While it could be argued that these moments simply carried more pressure and thus required more composure, critics felt the delays were strategic and intentional, designed to break the opponent's rhythm and gain a psychological edge. His use of the towel also became a flashpoint in the wider discussion about court etiquette. Nadal's tendency to request the towel from the ball kids after nearly every point, not occasionally, but ritualistically, placed an unusual and constant burden on them. Over time, many viewed this as excessive, even exploitative, especially given how exacting he was about the process. The ATP eventually introduced a policy requiring players to retrieve their own towels, a change that many observers quietly attributed, at least in part, to Nadal's behavior setting the wrong example. Despite this, the tennis establishment rarely addressed the issue head-on. Commentators often glossed over the delays, focusing instead on Nadal's fighting spirit or his ability to battle through physical exhaustion. Umpires were inconsistent, perhaps hesitant to challenge such a high-profile figure. Fans, fiercely loyal to Nadal, largely ignored or defended the behavior, framing it as part of his unique charm and discipline. But those who played against him, especially in close contests, often left the court visibly frustrated, if not openly angry, at the way he controlled not just the match, but the pace of it. With his retirement, the issue of Nadal's on-court antics faded into the background, softened by nostalgia and his overall contributions to the game. Yet any honest evaluation of his career required acknowledgement of this persistent controversy. He was not the only player to engage in subtle gamesmanship, but few did it as consistently or were afforded such leniency. For many, especially fellow professionals, the frustration wasn't simply that he took too long between points. It was that the rules were bent, consciously or not, in his favor. In a quiet but profound way, Nadal helped change the architecture of modern tennis. The shot clock, the towel box rule, and the stricter enforcement of pace were not theoretical ideas. They were practical responses to the habits of one of the game's most visible figures. His influence on tennis extended not just to the record books, but to the rule book. In the end, Nadal's greatness was never in doubt. His impact on the sport, his humility off the court, and his unparalleled achievements, particularly at Roland Garros, secured his place among the immortals. But the undercurrent of irritation among his peers regarding his delays was real and lasting. It was part of the complex legacy he left behind, one that included not just trophies and tributes, but also raised eyebrows, clenched jaws, and lingering questions about fairness in a game built on timing, precision, and equality before the rules. This topic regarding Nadal's on-court antics was stirred up by none other than Nick Kyrgios, who has been in the center of attention for many reasons not related to his own tennis. Nick's comments offered one of the most candid and emotionally charged insights into how Nadal's on-court demeanor affected his peers. Kyrgios didn't merely express mild frustration or tactical critique. He admitted to feeling a deep, visceral resentment that went as far as hatred. What makes this particularly striking is that Kyrgios drew a sharp contrast between Nadal and other members of the Big Four. While he respected Federer, Djokovic, and Murray, it was only Nadal who evoked this level of emotional turmoil in him. The root of that hostility, as Kyrgios explained, stemmed from Nadal's excessive rituals and slow pace between points. In describing Nadal's actions as tennis illnesses, Kyrgios made clear that he didn't just find them annoying, he found them distasteful, even repulsive. The slow walks, the long pauses before serves, and the compulsive habits during matches became a personal affront to Kyrgios, who prided himself on instinctual, fast-paced, feel-based tennis. For him, Nadal represented everything he wished to prove was unnecessary for success: obsessive control, relentless repetition, and an almost mechanical approach to the sport. Kyrgios also revealed how this resentment fueled his motivation. Rather than shutting down under the weight of that emotion, he used it as a fire to raise his game. His desire to beat Nadal wasn't just competitive, it was ideological. He wanted to show that tennis could be played freely, without routines, without micromanaged focus, and still achieve results. In this way, Nadal became both his greatest irritation and one of his most potent sources of inspiration. What adds further complexity to Kyrgios' stance is the element of admiration beneath the hatred. He acknowledged that he idolized Nadal's work ethic, and that his intense reaction came from a place of conflicting respect and opposition. It wasn't hatred born from jealousy or lack of understanding, but from a fundamental clash in philosophy. Kyrgios respected the results but rejected the method. This emotional tension made their matches especially volatile and captivating. Kyrgios' unpredictability clashing with Nadal's stoicism created a unique rivalry defined not by symmetry, but by contrast. Their head-to-head was not just a battle of styles, but a duel of temperaments, making every meeting a psychological standoff as much as a physical one. It is fair to say that Kyrgios is a bit unpopular with tennis fans, but he seems unaffected by it as he is ready to call out such a loved legend of the game. But, in a way, he said out loud the things other players and fans have been thinking for a long time. His words give voice to what many players over the years may have felt but chose not to say. In doing so, he exposed the psychological toll Nadal's playing style could take on his opponents, not just in terms of physical endurance or tactical difficulty, but in the way it got under their skin, challenged their rhythms, and forced them into a mental grind that extended far beyond rallies and scorelines.